They were pensioners with pacemakers, and they pulled off one of the biggest heists in British history. London, Easter weekend, 2015. The city exhaled. Offices emptied. The streets in the Diamond District fell silent. Shops closed, shutters down, alarms on. A long weekend in spring, the kind that makes even thieves take a break. But in a quiet suburb, one man didn't. Brian Reeder, 76 years old, stood at his kitchen sink in Kent, rinsing out a mug. His hands were slow, his eyes, not. They moved like clockwork. To anyone passing by, he was just another old man on a quiet morning. But Reeder had once been called the Master. He'd been out of the game for years. Heart issues, funeral suits, visits to the GP, the life of a retiree. But inside he still burned with it. He'd been watching. The Hatton Garden Safe Deposit, a fortress in the heart of London's jewel district, unassuming on the outside, but inside, diamonds, gold, cash, safety deposit boxes so secret even the owners didn't always remember what they'd stored, and Brian had a key. Not a literal one, not yet, but a mental one. He knew the rhythms, knew the shifts, knew that Easter weekend with 4 days of shutdown was a gift. So he picked up his old mobile. The numbers were still there, buried beneath years of silence. Terry Perkins, diabetic, wiry, dangerous. John Kenny Collins, deaf in one ear, eyes like a hawk. Danny Jones, reckless, charming, and greedy. Men he'd worked with, trusted, feared. And then he made the call. No emotion, no nostalgia, just this. One last job. You in? That weekend, while most of London sipped wine in gardens or attended church in pastel clothes, 4 old men sat in a garage staring at blueprints, reading specs, making lists, and lighting a fuse that would burn through the heart of London's vaults. Because beneath the stillness of Easter weekend, something was coming. Slow, patient, and lethal. It didn't start with drills. It started with silence, long pauses between questions, careful nods. This wasn't a gang of street kids. It was chess, and Brian Reeder was still a grandmaster. They met in Kenny Collins' white van, parked inconspicuously outside a cafe in North London. Inside, a fake CCTV monitor blinked, not to watch the outside world, but to hide what was really going on inside. This was base camp, and this was where the plan took shape. They didn't need speed, they needed time. Time was the real weapon. And Easter weekend, a 4-day pause, gave them just enough to disappear beneath London and emerge inside a steel vault. Brian brought the brains. Terry Perkins brought the old blueprints. He'd done a job there years ago, before prison. He remembered the layout. Mostly. Jones? He brought ambition and a list of tools long enough to rebuild the entire block. Collins handled logistics, but quietly. His role was to drive, to wait, and to listen, even if he didn't always hear everything. And then there was a 5th man, the outsider. They called him Basil. No real name, no backstory, no history. He didn't speak much, but he had what the others didn't: access. Basil had somehow managed to get into the building before. He knew the alarm system, the layout, the elevator shaft, and he had keys. The plan was mad, but elegant. Step 1, get in on Thursday night through a side entrance on Hatton Garden. Basil would disable the alarms. Step 2, take the lift down to the basement. Except they wouldn't use the lift. They'd descend down the shaft, ropes, gear, and age be damned. Step 3. Break through the thick steel security door, not by opening it, but by drilling through the wall next to it, concrete, brick, rebar. Then into the vault, They didn't want all the boxes, just the right ones. Jewelry, cash, no weapons, no blood, just a clean surgical job. Old school. They bought industrial drills off the books, a Hilti DD350 diamond core drill, expensive, loud, and built for destruction. They'd need batteries, cooling systems, harnesses, dust sheets, cameras, gloves, and silence. Over tea and biscuits, they mapped it all out. Not in some lair, in living rooms, in pubs, in a van with steamed-up windows. They rehearsed timing, entry points, backup plans. Brian was clear. We do this right, no one gets hurt. We vanish. We retire. But even then, there were cracks. Terry's blood sugar kept dropping. Kenny's hearing was worse than anyone admitted. Danny kept talking about gold Rolexes, too loudly, too often. And Basil? No one knew what he really wanted, or who he really was. But the job was set. Thursday night, Easter weekend, one final performance, the kind you don't walk away from twice. Thursday, April 2nd, 2015. The streets of Hatton Garden were empty. Shadows clung to the pavement like smoke. Cameras blinked overhead, watching nothing. 11:10 p.m. The van rolled to a stop. No screech, no headlights, just stillness. Out stepped Brian, Terry, Kenny, Danny, and Basil, dressed in workman's clothes, high-vis vests, gloves, and hard hats. To anyone passing by, if there had been anyone, they looked like contractors, maintenance crew on a late shift, but the tools in their bags weren't for fixing, they were for breaking. Basil opened the door. No forced entry, no alarm. He knew the system, knew where to step, what to touch, what to avoid. Down the hallway, past security cameras, into the elevator shaft. The lift had been parked at the top floor, disabled. They roped up and climbed down like old, creaky commandos. Jones slipped once. Terry wheezed, but they made it, one by one, into the basement of the Hatton Garden Safe Deposit Company. Now, the vault stood before them. Solid steel, no hinges, no give, so they didn't go through it, they went next to it. 3 feet of reinforced concrete separated them from the money. The Hilti DD350 came out, industrial grade, monstrous, buzzing like a chainsaw through stone. They drilled for hours. Concrete dust filled the room like fog. They had cooling systems, vacuums, but the noise? It was insane. And still, no alarm, no cops. They drilled 3 holes wide enough to crawl through. Then, silence. They were in. Inside, it was a treasure chest. Over 70 deposit boxes, jewelry, gold, cash. Some boxes opened cleanly, others pried open with crowbars. They worked in gloves, methodical. They did not take everything, just the good stuff. They piled it into large green holdalls, coins, rings, Rolexes, rare gems, wads of notes bundled in elastic. It wasn't smooth. Terry had to sit down twice. Jones nearly dropped a bag into the elevator shaft. Kenny forgot where he'd parked the van. But by Friday morning, as London woke up to the long weekend, the gang left, quietly, bags full, bodies aching, no alarms, no blood, no trace. Or so they thought. What they didn't know was that the drill had jammed halfway through the job. They hadn't finished. They'd have to come back. That was the decision that would break everything. Friday, April 3rd. The gang should have been celebrating, but instead, they were planning round 2. The Hilti drill had overheated mid-job. They hadn't finished cracking all the boxes, Some of the best ones were still sealed behind steel. And Brian? He wasn't happy about it. "We go back," he said. "One more night, that's it." It was a risk, a big one. Going back to the scene of the crime? Stupid, dangerous, reckless. But greed talks louder than fear. And someone, maybe Jones, maybe all of them, wanted more. So they did it. Saturday night, April 4th, they returned. Same route, same crawl down the shaft, same vault, same drill. But this time, it felt different. Tension clung to them like sweat. They moved faster, sloppier. No careful cuts, just brute force. And in their rush, they triggered something. Not an alarm, not yet. But motion sensors picked up irregular vibrations. A security company logged the spike, but with no sign of a break-in, it was dismissed as a system glitch. They got lucky. Again. But inside the team, things weren't clean. Danny Jones was growing cocky. He joked about buying a Bentley. He flashed a watch to a pub landlord. Terry's insulin was low and he started snapping, yelling at Jones for making noise. Kenny was confused, misplacing tools, forgetting the time. Even Brian, the cool-headed leader, began to doubt the decision. He whispered to Basil, asking if anyone had seen them. Basil just stared back. Quiet. Unreadable. By Sunday morning, it was done. They thought they'd cleared nearly $14 million in goods. It was closer to $20 million. And this time, they walked away for real. No alarms, no sirens. They drove back to their neighborhoods, hung up the gloves, turned on the news. But something had shifted. The vault would be discovered within hours. And once it was, the cracks would split wide open. Tuesday, April 7th. The holiday was over. London yawned back to life, and down in Hatton Garden, someone smelled something off. A vault technician noticed a deposit box hanging open, then another, then another. By 9:15 a.m., the Metropolitan Police were on site. What they found inside looked like a war zone. Concrete rubble, torn open steel, power tools discarded in the dust sheets hung like shrouds. More than 70 deposit boxes emptied. But here's the twist. There were no fingerprints, no CCTV footage. The cameras inside the building hadn't been working that weekend. The lift had been immobilized. An entry? Still locked from the inside. It was surgical. It was cold. It was professional. And the press went mad. Biggest burglary in British history. Ocean's 11 with dentures. The great-granddad robbery. But behind the headlines, the investigation began. The flying squad, the elite anti-robbery unit, took charge. And they weren't laughing. They combed the building, scanned traffic cams, searched for anomalies. And they found one. A white Mercedes van parked near Hatton Garden over multiple nights. Registered to John Kenny Collins. The van hadn't moved much, but it had seen everything. And Kenny? He'd left it parked on his own street, in plain sight. From there, it snowballed. Police bugged the van, tapped phones, planted hidden microphones in their cars and homes, and what they recorded was pure gold. Terry, Danny, Kenny, boasting, bickering, laughing. We're in the money now, boys. That watch alone's 10 grand. I'm not sharing with that prick again. Brian had gone quiet. Some said he sensed the net closing. Others say he already knew. But the rest? They were celebrating, openly. The cracks weren't in the vault anymore. They were in the crew, and soon the whole thing would shatter. 6 weeks after the heist, the walls caved in. May 19, 2015, the Met launched Operation Geranium, and at 10:20 a.m., officers moved in. Fast, quiet, coordinated. Brian Reeder was arrested at his home. He didn't resist, didn't say a word, just sat in his chair and nodded, like he'd been expecting them, like it was already over. Terry Perkins was caught making tea. Danny Jones tried to hide behind a wardrobe. Kenny Collins was still wearing his high-vis jacket. Inside their homes? Stacks of cash, bags of jewels, receipts, tools, notes, And inside Kenny's van, the surveillance bug still running, dozens of hours of audio confession. But there was one man missing, Basil, the ghost. No full name, no fingerprints, the man who had the keys. He vanished without a trace, and for years, the police couldn't find him. The case went to trial in 2016. The courtroom was packed. A gang of pensioners sitting like bored grandfathers, in glasses, cardigans, hearing aids, but the evidence was overwhelming. They were all found guilty. Reeder got 6 years. Jones, Perkins, Collins, 7 each. They served time. Some died behind bars. Others were released, old, sick, forgotten. And the loot? Of the 14 million pounds stolen, only about 4 million pounds was recovered. The rest, gone, melted down, hidden, passed hand to hand until it vanished into the black market. But Basil? He stayed a myth until 2019, when police finally unmasked him as Michael Seed, an electronics expert who'd been living a quiet life just blocks from the crime scene. He was arrested, tried, and sentenced. But by then, the story had already become a legend. A gang of old men, one perfect plan, a second chance that turned into a mistake, and a vault that whispered, "Not bad, for your last job." Catch you in the next one. Until then, stay sharp and stay free.